In the city of red bricks and smoking chimneys, when the American Republic walks into the fire, a discreet house opens its doors and changes the course of money. It is 1861. Philadelphia smells of coal, of fresh printer's ink, of workers' sweat. In this city, where the streets still trace the shadow of the founding fathers, a copper plate gleams on a facade. Jay Cooke Company. Inside, wooden desks, thick ledgers, goose quills dipped in black ink. No princely palace marble, no empire columns. A private banking house, a house of men, not of titles. Here, no joint stock company to spread the risks. The partners stand exposed before fate. Their liability is unlimited. If they fall, their goods, their homes, their lands, everything goes down with them. Their names are their ramparts and their chains. At the head, a man with a piercing gaze, a broad forehead, hands as used to columns of figures as others are to horse reins. Jay Cooke. He was not born a prince of finance. He comes from the studious offices of E.W. Clark Company, a respected discount house, where he learns, day after day, the silent language of bills, the dance of bills of exchange, the weight of public securities. Before 1861, he already knows how to place state debt, to gauge risk, to judge a signature. He knows the corridors of local treasuries, the needs of hurried governments. At his side, William G. Moorhead, partner, accomplice, another pillar of this new edifice. Together, they choose Philadelphia to plant their banner. This is no accident. The city is a crossroads. Between textile workshops and foundries, between the docks where ships dock and the railroad lines already piercing toward the west, money circulates, seeking channels. Philadelphia, Washington, New York. 3 names, 3 gates of the same empire in the making. But the time is no longer for the laziness of quiet business. War is coming, heavy, inevitable. Secession tears the Union apart. Flags rise, drums pound, cavalry units form. In the smoke that rises, another battle begins, silent, relentless. The battle of money. For cannons, rifles, uniforms, gunpowder, everything has a price. And this price must be paid, day after day, month after month, without respite. In 1861, a man takes the keys of the federal treasury. Salmon P. Chase. He bears the crushing burden of financing the Union. Taxes exist, but they are not enough. A federal income tax is invented. Customs duties are raised. Excise taxes are levied on tobacco, alcohol, 1,000 products. Yet all this is a river compared to the ocean of needs. War demands more. So Chase turns to borrowing. He chooses loans as the backbone of financing. Debt becomes the armor of the Union. It is then that Jay Cooke truly enters the scene. 1862. In the corridors of Washington, an agreement is forged. The Treasury and Jay Cooke Company sign a pact that will bind one man's fortune to a nation's destiny. The Philadelphia House receives a key mission: to place federal bonds with the public. First, these 520 bonds that can be redeemed after 5 years and that mature after 20. Then these 730 notes, bills bearing interest at 7.30% per year. The formula is simple, yet immense. The state issues, Jay Cooke places. For every dollar he manages to draw from the pocket of a citizen, a bank, an insurance company, the house earns a commission. The rates are engraved in contracts, recorded in the Treasury's archives. These are the visible grains of the harvest. Each tranche, each million placed, feeds the government's coffers and swells Jay Cooke's fortune. The banker becomes the great intermediary between power and the crowd, between the promise of a coupon and the blood spilled on the battlefields. But Cooke does not content himself with waiting, seated behind a counter. He invents a new machine. He deploys a network of thousands of agents and sub-agents, woven across the Union States like an invisible army. In the cities, in the towns, local banks become his relays. Correspondents, those little houses never named in mysterious books, fight for him. The country is covered with counters, where what is sold is not cloth or grain, but debt securities. Peasants, artisans, small savers, for the first time, enter the theater of high finance. They buy federal bonds as one would buy a share in victory, a ticket to support the Union troops. War becomes not only a matter of soldiers, but of subscriptions, of bond issues, of coupons clipped in the silence of family homes. Cooke knows how to speak to these men and women. He knows he must win them over, persuade them. So he turns his gaze toward another weapon, the press. Newspapers become his trumpets. In the Philadelphia Inquirer, in the New York Tribune, advertisements appear, paid inserts, full columns praising the safety, nobility, and profitability of war bonds. These are not cold notices. Honor, patriotism, and the future of children are invoked. Favorable articles multiply, blending moral argument and financial calculation. Buying a bond means supporting Lincoln, clothing a soldier, arming a cannon, but also preparing one's own retirement. Ink becomes a lever as powerful as the cavalry. Months pass. Battles follow one another. Antietam, Gettysburg. The names of the fields are etched into the people's memory. And behind each name, behind each cemetery that expands, the columns of numbers grow as well. Between 1862 and 1865, Jay Cooke Company places several $100 million of federal debt. The ledgers fill with lines. The Treasury's coffers fill enough to feed the war machine. The cannons thunder because the bonds are selling. The Philadelphia house, small at first between bricks and smoke, becomes the main bridge between the state and the markets. The subscribers to the bonds themselves form a motley world. There are individuals, small savers who put in a few tens or a few hundreds of dollars, saved dollar by dollar. There are the national banks, created under the National Banking Acts of 1863 and 1864, new legal creatures that take root in cities to weave a more unified system. There are insurance companies, institutional investors, those large, cold but powerful bodies that seek regular income. The circuit is clear, almost geometric. The Treasury issues bonds. Jay Cooke Company underwrites them in bulk or in tranches, taking them onto its books. Then the firm cuts them up, figuratively speaking, redistributes them to the public in exchange for notes, gold, deposits. A commission rewards each tranche placed. The funds collected flow back to the Treasury, feed the payrolls of the soldiers, pay the arms suppliers, the iron for the rails, the horses, the wagons of the requisitioned railroad companies. They feed the river of money that irrigates military contractors, workshops, factories. The direct beneficiaries emerge, clear silhouettes against the smoky background. First, there is Jay Cooke Company itself. Commissions, interest on advances granted to the Treasury, the political prestige that comes with this role of financial savior. Each bond sold strengthens its fortune and influence. Next come the national banks. They buy federal bonds, then use these securities as collateral, as guarantee, to issue a new currency, the national banknotes, which circulate in citizens' pockets. The bills are backed by the debt. The economy starts beating to the rhythm of the coupons. Finally, there are the industrialists, the war suppliers, the steel mills that forge rails and cannons, the textile mills that weave the blue uniforms, the arms workshops that adjust breech blocks, polish cylinders. All are paid in money issued from this debt, in dollars whose value rests on confidence in a government that promises to repay later. But already the system shows its flaws. To cover immediate needs, Congress authorizes the issuance of greenbacks, legal tender notes that, for the moment, are not convertible into gold. The Legal Tender Acts of 1862 and 1863 open the door to a forced paper currency. Inflation creeps in. The price of bread, coal, cloth rises. In taverns, people talk. Some applaud this money that makes it possible to pay the soldiers. Others are fearful. Gold becomes more expensive. The question of convertibility, of a return to a currency firmly anchored in precious metal, makes its way into the debates. After 1865, the cannons fall silent. The flags are folded. The dead remain. The debt, however, remains whole, high as a wall. Military spending shrinks, but the stock of federal debt remains massive. Then a new challenge arises. What to do with this accumulated capital, with these fortunes born of war? How to redirect the flow? The West calls. The plains, forests, and mountains promise land, timber, minerals. Cities expand. People dream of rails crossing the continent, of trains that will link the Atlantic to the Pacific in a few days. Congress has already laid down the legal path. The Pacific Railway Acts of 1862 and 1864 granted the railroad companies land subsidies and guaranteed bonds. The Union Pacific and the Central Pacific received land and credit. But another line was emerging, further north, wilder, the Northern Pacific Railroad. In 1864, a federal charter granted this company an immense privilege. More than 40 million acres of land were promised to it, along a route meant to run from Lake Superior to Puget Sound on the Pacific coast. 40 million acres. A vast area, an almost continuous strip of territory, a promise of forests, fields, villages yet to be born. The logic seemed irresistible. The company received land. It resold it to settlers, to speculators, to adventurers. The money from these sales financed construction. The lands became the basis for new bonds, secured by these parcels and by future traffic. The rail line advanced, the freight cars filled with wheat, lumber, and ore. The revenues repaid the securities.
For a man like Jay Cooke, the prospect was clear. He already possessed unique expertise in placing public debt. Why not apply it to these railroad bonds, backed by the American land itself? He saw the possibility of transforming these colossal land grants into negotiable paper, into bonds sold to investors from one ocean to the other. The rails would become a new kind of war, not of rifles, but of capital. After the war, America was no longer alone in looking at its own securities. The Atlantic turned into a mirror. London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Frankfurt,
All these markets, with their old banks and firmly established houses, bought American bonds. First federal debt, considered safe, then railroad bonds, riskier and more profitable. Europe was looking for places to invest its surpluses, to grow the indemnities it had received, to anchor its gold. America offered the promise of endless growth. Jay Cooke Company plunged into these circuits as into a familiar river. European correspondents, especially in London, served as intermediaries. They presented American securities to British investors and to continental bankers. The Barings, the Rothschilds, these great houses dominated the market. In New York, Kuhn, Loeb and Company, J.P. Morgan and Company were gaining strength. Competition was fierce, but Cooke retained a specificity. His base in the American public, his proven ability to reach retail savers. He cast himself as a specialist in public debt, then in railroad bonds, linking the savings of the small bondholder in Ohio with the capital of the London banker. Transatlantic flows intensified. American securities crossed the ocean, arriving in European vaults. In return, capital in gold dollars, in bills of exchange, flowed back to New York, to Philadelphia, to the construction sites of the West. This European money paid for rails, bridges, stations, financed mines and farms. But this dance depended on one fragile, intangible thing: confidence. The confidence of foreign investors, sensitive to every rumor, to every fluctuation in the price of gold, to tensions between New York and London, to exchange rate movements that shook the telegraph cables. And already, before the drama broke out, cracks were appearing. The years 1868 to 1872 saw a proliferation of railroad projects. The mileage of track laid in just a few years defied imagination. Maps filled up with lines, black strokes that promised future journeys. But behind these strokes, debts were piling up. The companies, including the Northern Pacific, went into debt even before completing their lines. They borrowed to build, to pay engineers and workers, to buy iron and locomotives. Revenues came later, much later. In the American and British press, voices were raised. People spoke of overbuilding, of frenzy. They questioned the soundness of railroad bonds. Some newspapers still praised the boldness of the promoters. Others denounced the madness of building lines in almost deserted regions. The debate grew harsher. On the markets, the price of gold in New York fluctuated violently. On September 24, 1869, Black Friday struck. Jay Gould and James Fisk attempted a corner in gold. The operation ended in shock. Prices soared, then collapsed. The day revealed how vulnerable the American financial system was to brutal speculative maneuvers. Yet, in the early 1870s, the name Jay Cooke still shone. The man who financed the Union, who kept the Treasury from the abyss, remained a pillar. His closeness to federal authorities still inspired confidence. Savers, investors, and European bankers continued to look upon him with respect. They see in him a fighter who has already gone through the storm and come out stronger. They do not yet see that, beneath the wood-paneled offices of Philadelphia, another storm is beginning to swell, silently. That at the heart of this financial machine, it is the same forces that made its greatness: the audacity, the single-mindedness, the faith in the future, that will soon threaten to overturn everything. The Northern Pacific Line is still only an unfinished ribbon flung toward the west. But on this ribbon, the fate of Jay Cooke Company is already being played out, and, behind it, the balance of a capitalism that now links the mines of Montana to the parlors of London by the single thread of debt. The hour is approaching when confidence will turn, when coupons will become a burden, when the same newspapers that glorified the war bonds will announce on the front page the fall of a house many believed invincible. The world of money, like that of empires, does not forgive weakness. And already, in the distant rumble of the rail advancing across the plains, one can hear, for those who know how to listen, the creaking of wood giving way under a weight too heavy.